Welcome to Wagon Wheel. I'm Jarrod Kimber. With me is Virat Sundaresan, and we will be answering your questions because that is what we do on this podcast. If you want to get them in early, go to Patreon and subscribe and get other things like a Discord and ad-free stuff. And you can ask me personal questions, private questions, if you would like. Not Barrett. He's an open book. But yeah, you can do that there. Or if you're in the YouTube with us live now, obviously Super Chats is the other way to go on this one. But we'll also have a look and see if there's anything in the chat overall if we have any time. Although I have seen how many questions we have today, Barrett. It is possible that we have no time. But let's start with the first one and work our way from there. Swami Nathan says, I have a hypothesis that the successful T20 batters in the West hit the ball a bit like a golf swing, whereas subcontinental cricketers play more orthodox cricketing shots or slugging. Am I Looney Tunes, or is there some truth to this? So I'm not sure this is everyone in the world. There is certainly a movement within English cricket. We've seen it with some of their coaches, but certainly with their players, where it's not just a golf swing. I mean, in Joss Butler's case, I think he was a hockey player. So there's certainly an element of hockey swing in that. But you can see, you don't get to see it very often. You can see it at the ground, but you can sometimes see it from a low-level camera if it's in the right angle, that when Joss Butler or Jason Roy or someone else hits the ball, Johnny Bairstow's another one, there's a power fade on their ball like a golfer.
Yeah.
Like it slices a little bit. And they refer to this all the time. And I remember being in Sri Lanka with Gareth Batty, who's the coach of a bunch of those guys. And I was talking about Dasan Chanaka. And he was saying that if you watch him, he hits in a conventional way. Whereas if you watch the England boys, they do hit in this new style. I wouldn't say everyone in the West does it. I don't think David Warner does it, for instance.
No.
And Sky probably has a different kind of technique. And Hardik Pandya, well, the old Hardik Pandya anyway, had a different kind of technique. So I don't think it's as straight as you think. But I do think that there is, I think Australia and South Africa have always had more kind of muscular batting styles, probably something to do with the wickets as much as anything else. And I do think that since white ball got very popular in England, people have started this new power fade golf/hockey style of swinging. And the best video, you've probably seen this one, Bharat, is when they show Freddie Flintoff hitting sixes, and then they show Joss Butler. They did a hit off together in the middle of the ground, and Butler was clearing him by about 40 meters, despite not looking like he was trying to hit it as hard as Flintoff was. So there's definitely a different way in the way that some people go, but I don't think it's like widespread and everyone does it either.
MS Dhoni is a great example of that. I remember him working on his power hitting in 2017 when it looked like he'd kind of lost it. And a lot of the dynamics or the body alignment that he was working on was, sort of similar to a golf swing where you clear your hips, the flexion in your legs to just clear the whole energies to make sure that you get that complete swing, and also to make sure that the bat isn't coming from. And what was happening with him was because he had his body was changing as well. He still was powerful, but that's when he changed his diet in 2017. He went on a very grilled chicken, from butter chicken to grilled chicken, and got leaner. I mean, there was more leaner meat on MS Dhoni than bulk, as used to be the case. He's always been a really strong, powerful man. And what was happening is with him that because it wasn't coming through, the power wasn't being generated by the hips and opening up of that, the power was coming from the shoulder. And think about it, if you are using more shoulder, the bat can't come straight because then you'll have no power. And automatically it starts going wider and wider and wider. And as a result, all you're trying to do is muscle the ball with your shoulder, and you won't generate the same kind of power. And if you start using your hip more and just clear that out, like a Hardik Pandya does, you'll see the bat swing also comes from a lot. Here's my hand. There it is. Yeah, from a lot straighter. And that's why you see some guys like Hardik Pandya who looks really lean, but hits long sixes. And similarly with MS Dhoni as well, right? He hits long sixes without really making it look like a big hit, if that makes sense. Yeah, speaking of very conventional six hitters, I don't know why this was the batter that came to mind when you were talking about Freddie Flintoff and the difference between Joss Butler and him. It was Mahmudullah from Bangladesh. If you see, I've always been a big Mahmudullah fan, but I mean, it's not that he hits too many sixes, but when he does, that's such a conventional way of approaching six hitting. as compared to Josh Butler or what MS
Yeah.
Dhoni did all those years ago. Or and now we have so many biffers as well. Like there's the Puran way to do it,
Yeah.
which is not very golf centric at all.
No.
And yeah,
And I think there's a bit of baseball with some of the West Indians, and also
yes,
Chris Lynn was probably someone that, and Corey Anderson, probably another one who had that sort of baseball style. So I think it's not just that there's a golf thing and there's not a golf thing.
yeah,
So I do think it's multiple sports. I wrote this piece in. I can't remember which World Cup it was. It might have been 2016 World Cup, where essentially it was quite clear even then that you had strikers. And by that, you had people like Martin Guptill and Yuvraj Singh, who they needed timing as much as anything. And then you had these other guys coming through who were sometimes more muscular, although, as you've said, these days, I mean, Matty Wade and Hardik Pandya kind of go against the sort of you need to be big and
yeah,
strong to be able to do that. Although clearly it helps for, Richard Levi type guys as well. But yes, I do think I think there's a different way of going about it. And I think the biggest difference is that a lot of those more traditional hitters, the people who have to strike the ball perfectly all the time, and Mut Mudula would be a very good example of that. They have to hit very much the very center of the bat, and their timing has to be really good. Whereas some of these other guys, they don't need, Marcus Stoinis doesn't need that as much because he's muscling the ball a little bit more. And you see that certainly with a lot of the West Indians. And the muscle thing is not really what we mean, because Nicholas Puran is not, a beefcake or anything like that. Well, what we're really talking about is that they are setting themselves up to hit the ball so far. And so even when they mishit it, it's going to go a little bit. Whereas a traditional cricket shot, unless you hit it absolutely out of the screws, Albert Trott style or, Chris Can style. I don't know why those are the two that come to mind, but they do. It's a little bit different. But great question. Thank you very much for that. Niran says, many people say Angelo Matthews never lived up to his true potential. I think he's done extremely well to play 100 tests and average 45 plus, considering his limited technique to short pitch bowling, playing in a weak team, injuries, etc., etc. He's one of the best current Asian batters in England and New Zealand. What do you think of Matthews as a test player?
I've always been a big fan of Angelo Matthews as a test player. I remember him in his early days. He made a 99 in that test match at the CCI in 2009 when he was in his early 20s. This is the test that is otherwise remembered for Virender Sehwag making 294 and just missing out on his third triple hundred. We should have made him the first ever to do that, the only guy to do that in men's test cricket. But he played beautifully on a pretty flattish pitch, but you could see that he was. I mean, Jayawardena and Sangakkara were still at their peak, 2009, but you could already see that at least Sri Lanka's batting is in good hands because Angelo Matthews was coming through the ranks, and he's a lot like Jason Holder in the sense he's always identified as a leader from a young age. I remember doing this big interview with him once during the IPL. And he spoke about that, like being anointed as a leader from right from his school days, and so he played both roles. And his bowling, I think, is what dropped off with time. Right, I thought he was a genuinely good all rounder when he started off. Came off the long run, could bowl quick. He had a sharp bouncer, could move the ball around. But his batting, I wouldn't say his batting improved after his bowling dropped. It's almost like he was a better cricketer, a better batter when he could bowl as well. I think that is, I don't know about the numbers, but just looking at him, he just looked like a more confident cricketer when he could bowl as well. And when he was captain and we could do all three of that. So I think he, in a way, I think he's lived up to his true potential. He scored hundreds everywhere. He scored match-winning hundreds overseas as well in England, if I'm not mistaken. The bouncing ball, has been a bugbear, but it's been the case for a lot of batters from the subcontinent or from anywhere who play with low hands. And we've seen so many
He's
Kiwi
quite
batters
upright as well when he bats.
He is.
He's not tall because I've stood next to him. I don't think he's even above 6 foot, but he bats like he's taller. And that's almost the worst way to be an Asian batter when you go to the West.
Yeah, exactly. So the weight is always on the front foot. Your hands are slightly lower. So he gets like nicked off a lot, or he has been nicked off a lot in, say, South Africa or Australia. But I think it's a fantastic test career, and he's in the top 5. I think you would put him in the top 5 greatest Sri Lankan batters of all time. Maybe not. Maybe just outside the top 5. Sangakkara, Jayawardena, Arvinder De Silva, and then do you slot Sana Jayasuriya and Dilshan in there?
I don't think they're above him. I
No,
just
I
don't think
think
they are. And I think he's batted in a tougher era than. Oh,
yes,
actually, maybe that's not true of Jay Surya, but certainly of Dilshan, he batted in a tougher era.
yeah,
They've had some good players. Arjuna was a very good player as well, but I'm not sure his or Roy
yeah,
Dias's record but quite stand up. Look, I'd probably go the opposite way, but the only reason is that when he came through, I had him in the big four, so I had a big
yeah,
five.
yeah,
And so I probably either I got it wrong or I'm the person that has ruined his. Yeah, he said he had a higher potential than everyone else. I don't know, but he never moved up the order enough. I
yeah.
thought he had the ability to do that, but I think he played too much like a number 5 or a number 6 for too much in his
That's
career.
true.
When I think he should have been a number 3 or a number 4. Maybe the technical issues you were talking about before is the reason why that hasn't happened, which is fair. Bowling, I'm not too worried about, especially because someone like him at a certain age, especially with his injuries, I think bowling he was going to have to stop bowling,
Yeah.
and he's still handy. He got Nicholas Puran out in the World Cup with one of the worst balls I've ever seen. So he still can bowl, but yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
What did he take 4 wickets in a over of a World T20 final? Am I remembering that right? Was it 3 wickets? It was a lot of
Three
wickets. I was
wickets,
there for the
maybe.
game. It was
Yeah,
at the Oval, but
yeah,
um, certainly not that kind of player. He was also one of the best fielders
yeah.
when he was young and athletic. He was one of the first guys to take the boundary catches where you throw the ball back and all that sort of stuff. He perfected that when really no one else had. So look, I think for me, I thought he had the ability to join those other. I remember doing, videos with George Dobell, and he was just like, "You're mad if you think he's going to become, Root or Smith or Virat, Kane and all those guys." And maybe he was right, but I did think that was his ceiling. And so if that's the case, then he hasn't lived up to his potential for me. But I don't think that means he's a failure. I think he's been a fantastic player, and it's very possible that because he looks so composed at times, that people like me overrated him. And I don't mean that in a bad way, like overrated him as
No,
if he was a dud, but just
yeah.
you sometimes you look at someone who looks so pure with the bat and you bump them up, whereas actually he probably is a number 5, right? And that's probably
He,
his peak. That's probably as high as he can go in the batting order
he
consistently.
is in time, and timing is everything, right? You also see when Virat Kohli and Joe Root and Kane Williamson and even Steve Smith, what part of their career they got to go higher up in the order. Like by the time Sangakkara and Jayawardene were gone,
Mm.
it was already around 2015. So Angelo Matthews had been around for 6 years. His role was changing. He's already captain.
And
Uh,
that's when facing fast bowling becomes really tough as well. So if he's going to go up, then it's going to be tougher anyway, right?
exactly.
And,
Yeah.
and they probably had better openers around for a lot of that
Yeah.
time as well. Although he did have Karunaratne at the back part of his career at least.
Mm.
But yeah, look, I think he's a fantastic player. It's just
Yeah.
that maybe there was a small percentage of us that overhyped him. It was probably you.
Yeah.
Manan says, I was looking over some AB de Villiers stats and I came across his IPL. I feel like he should have opened the innings. Did the fact that Kohli would have been the most effective at the top affect ABD? A Kohli and ABD opening partnership could have been like Faf this year. It wouldn't have been like that. It would have been better than that. But
Yeah.
I don't think he ever wanted to open. I think he opened a couple of
Mm.
times. He liked batting at number 4 from what I knew, and actually probably I never talked to him directly, but obviously, I was very briefly involved with RCB. I felt like he even wanted to be at 5. He really liked
Mm.
coming in between the sort of 10 and 12 over mark and doing his damage there. So not so much batting at number 5, but coming in at that point. He
Yeah.
didn't like facing 8 overs of spin when he first came in. He would have been fantastic in the power play. But if you look at Butler, you could argue that Butler is a better player for opening than he would have been if he came in the middle order, and I think
Yeah.
that's more than fair. I think with AB, I think he was so great in the middle order that unless he wanted to open, I'm not sure you would have moved him down. The Virat thing probably plays a part, but Virat's batted at number 3 a lot too, so I don't think it's
Yeah.
necessarily that. They have Watto and they had Gale at times, so they did have a lot of openers.
Yeah. Gale in particular, I mean, for the longest period of time, he had 6-7 years with RCB, if not more, when he either opened with someone else or with Virat Kohli, and that was the top 4, right? And I think what has also contributed, perhaps, or what did contribute to AB de Villiers not opening, or even that being a possibility, A, like you said, maybe he didn't want to do it, and B, if you look at the history of RCB, how, apart from Gale, Virat Kohli, AB de Villiers and Faf du Plessis and maybe some other foreign players, they never really got that one Indian top order batter from the others, apart from Virat Kohli. I mean, there was a period when Mayank Agarwal seemed to be doing well many years ago. There were periods when they found like even KL Rahul had one good season with them very early on in his career, but they've never really managed to find someone who could break up that mix and get AB de Villiers to play other roles, like whether it's opening or batting at a four or not four. He did bat a lot at four, but at five or below that, where like he could have been used in other ways. So I think that has played a big role in that as well. So I think it's team combination, but yeah, when you are AB de Villiers, it's a personal choice as well. But I think if maybe in a world with Chris Gale where he doesn't fire for RCB and he's not around, who knows, maybe they would have been forced to go with that role and say, these are the only two guys who seem to be scoring, which was the case with RCB for many years, and just push them up the order, and the rest can do whatever.
Another one from Manan. When drafting the greatest IPL players of all time, if presented you with the choice of the big five West Indians, Bravo, Gale, Narayan, Russell, Pollard, who would you choose? Because I can't have all five. Is that what he means? I think Narayan and Russell. I thought you got Gale as well. I certainly wouldn't have Bravo in my team, although I think he's been fantastic. I just think everyone else has maybe had higher heights, even though he might have been one of the more consistent. I suppose it depends on whether you're looking whole career or not, because Narayan was so good in that other period, right? Like, I mean, he was just absolutely next level, especially when he was making runs. And he couldn't be hit. I think Russell gets in automatically for me. And then if I can only pick one more, he seems to be saying I can only pick two in this. I'd pick four. But if he's only given me one more, if I've got Russell, then I'd go Narayan. I'd go Narayan and Russell, and then Gale's very unlucky, and Pollard's even more unlucky in that situation.
My first pick would be Pollard, because you get a captain as well. And I think one of the most underrated cricketing minds, at least in the T20 league circuit, or just overall. Just speak to him. If you've seen his rise from where he started in the 2007 World Cup as a replacement for someone last minute. People forget that Pollard played in the 2007 50 over World Cup, don't they? And then he burst onto the scene. Of course, I covered that tournament live in Hyderabad Champions League 2009. When he had T20 kind of like shaped into his head or into his hairdo back then. So that was a sign. He was sending a message that I'm born for T20 cricket. I'm going to revolutionize it, and which he did. So I think the impact that he had, the leadership skills that he has, and he still has the ability to bring people together. We've seen it briefly even when he played or when he was leading the West Indies on and off. I think he did it the first time in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, or 2017, one of my last tours there. So, but so Pollard would be my first pick. The second one, again, depends on what part of their career you're talking, right? I mean, there was a Chris Gale phase in between where he was just untouchable. And I think if Pollard is my captain, then I would pick Chris Gale, because again, like I said earlier, Pollard had the ability to bring out the best in some guys, especially Chris Gale. You remember that T20 series, was it last year or the year before, 2021, when Australia went to the West Indies and Pollard was captain, and Chris Gale was struggling, and he kept backing him. And that, I think, one game he scored runs, and Gale thanked Pollard for that support. I mean, eventually it didn't work out because Gale didn't do much for the West Indies in that year's World Cup and T20 World Cup. But yeah, I mean, Pollard and Gale for me would be my picks.
Perfect. All right. Oh, I've lost the questions, of course, now. All right. Bloody Bugger says, is Yasir Shah really the last classic leg spinner to play a decent number of tests? Someone who gets lots of spin but has less speed and variation. I'll never forget his 10 for at Lords. Well, I mean, at the moment he is. We talked about Rashid Khan is still playing test matches. The whole classic leg spinner, I don't know what a classic leg spinner is. I think Yasir Shah did actually have variations. So, if you mean a pure leg spinner just to spin the ball, I mean, Bishu was before him by a fair bit, wasn't he? And then obviously Parkinson's played one test in that time. I don't think it's the end of leg spinners, and I do think there is a different kind of leg spinner that might come through in Test cricket in the future. But yeah, I think that's a fairly decent claim at the moment.
I mean, the last classic leg spinner I remember, I mean, the most classical sense is Amit Mishra. Just his approach to the crease and just the way he worked on his leg spin. I mean, he had the googly, but he backed his leg break a lot, which is what a lot of classical leg spinners used to do in the past. If you read about them or see clips, so they started with the leg break and everything else all fell into place. I mean, starting with the great Shane Warne. Um, uh, the one guy I have been impressed with a lot during this IPL, and he is kind of classical in the way he goes about his leg spin, though I would love to see him in long form cricket, is Suyash Sharma, the kid who plays for KKR. Love the
Mhm.
hair, of course, to
Yeah.
start with, but I like his approach to leg spin, and he's got that innocence about him as well, which I kind of leg spinners need to have a strong personality either way, right? Like you can be like Shane Warne or whoever, but I think I like what he brings. He doesn't like being hit. He has that way of getting back at batters who just hit him for a six and getting
Hmm.
them out. But to back to Bloody Bugger's question, I do think that he is more classical than a lot of leg spinners that we do get to see these days, because a lot of them do. Ish Sodhi, for example, you see Ish Sodhi from, say, the first time I saw him 6 7 years ago. He looked oh no, in fact 10 years ago, when he was part of New Zealand A. They played a series against India A in I think Vishakhapatnam, and he looked so much more traditional, so much more classical than what he is now. Now he's been out there openly spoken about how he's remodeled himself as sort of being close to Rashid Khan, because that works in T20 cricket, and he's been very successful. And what, he got a test return, didn't he, in Pakistan
He
a
did.
few months ago? So that's worked out for him. So we won't see the classical Ish Sodhi anymore. So
I
I
don't know
think,
if I'd
yeah, there
call.
aren't.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if I'd call this other guy classical, but Brandon
Mm,
Mavuta from Zimbabwe is
right.
certainly a leg spinner to watch. I think he's played 5 tests so far. He's
Mm,
taken a couple of wickets. I think he averages high 20s in first class cricket.
right.
I first saw him play years ago in T20 cricket in South Africa and thought
No.
he was a pretty good talent. He's kind of an all rounder, although I'm not sure he's batting. He's more of a slugger than an all rounder. But hey, so am I, so I can't really complain there. But I think from that perspective, he's one to watch going into the future. And obviously, I don't think England will go back to Parkinson. But Parkinson is, a very, certainly, if that's what if you're talking about someone without a wrong'un, then Parkinson
Yeah.
is, the modern day Bishu. Chris says, thoughts on the retrospective pre-war era winners of the new Wisden Trophy as detailed in this year's almanac. Anything standing out to you? I haven't looked at them all. Do you know
Yeah.
anything about this?
No, I have no idea. The pre-war era winners of the new Wisden Trophy.
I'll be
No,
honest.
we'll have to.
I don't know how many people in the world know this, but like Wisden it's an English book for an England audience about the English
Yeah.
summer. So
Mm,
me and Bharat specifically cover global cricket. He's an
yeah.
Indian in Australia with a global bent, and obviously my main job is covering global cricket.
Mm,
I didn't even look at who the 5 cricketers of the summer were. I think Darryl Mitchell, did Tom Blundell get a gig as well? Was he the other one? I
I
think.
think Tom Blunden is in there. Harmanpreet Kaur is one of them.
Yeah.
Tom
I mean,
Blundell.
the only reason I usually have a look at the overseas players just to see if there's
Yeah.
someone interesting from an overseas
Yeah.
perspective or someone's been overlooked. But yeah, I think a lot of fans think of Wisden in a slightly different way than, it is set around the English summer. They're obviously trying to expand that, and Lawrence has done a lot
Yeah.
of interesting things with it. But,
He has.
it is still basically that. And so I dip out. Like, I know Lawrence, and I don't think I've ever interviewed him about Wisden at all. Um, I tell you, in fact, I'll tell you a funny story as a cricket writer. I got a job. One of the big things in English cricket writing, I don't know if you know about this, Barrett, is once you get a column in Wisden,
Mm.
you never give it up. I can't even say it, let alone
Oh.
right. So once you get it, you do it forever. So if you're like, I don't know, the Eton writer or the Durham
Right.
University writer or whatever it may be, you
Right.
do it
Right.
forever. I was the first writer about blogs. And then
Oh.
a couple of years after that, they offered me the podcast job as well. And
Oh.
I did about 3 years of the blogs and maybe 1 year of the podcast. And then I was like, look, to be honest, it takes a lot of work, and I'm not that interested. So many English writers were like, "You've given up a job writing for Wisden," and I was like, "Yeah, well, it doesn't pay that much, and it's one job a year." And I actually, if you think about it, like it's a bit different now. There aren't that many blogs anymore, but in the old days when I first came through, so from 2012, let's say, up until 2015 when blogs sort of died, there were many. Now think about how many podcasts there are. The other thing is that you get attacked by every blogger and podcaster for not mentioning their stuff in, right? And so I just didn't see it as a point. So yeah, sorry, Chris, I can't answer that at all. Maybe I'll Google it another time, but I've got nothing for you there. James says, a while ago, Shoaib Akhtar made a video attributing Jasprit Bumrah's back injury to his front-on action. Given that side-on bowlers historically have been prolific sufferers of back injuries, and there have been front-on bowlers who have had long, resilient careers, do you think there are any substances? James, one thing I would say is that Bumrah's front-on action is kind of nothing like any other action we've ever seen. If you see the side-on clips, he's 40 centimeters. He's releasing the ball from 40 centimeters closer than any other bowler ever has. So I would never go, his injuries are down to him being front-on or side-on. I'd probably say he's got a really short run-up, which is a weird run-up as well. Like, it's not even a smooth run-up for a short run-up. It's not like it was in Akram's. And then on top of that, he's delivering the ball in a way that we've probably never tested before. So I probably think that is more likely the problem rather than the front-on. But there is and Bharat will probably be able to tell you, there is certainly a feeling within cricket that front-on actions are more injury-dependent than side-on actions. I don't think there's any testing that backs that up, though.
I think it also has a lot to do with your... the body makeup and your body constitution, because there are also, then you have there's the mixed actions, and there's another kind of action, right? Like the middle something action, which is kind of where the back foot points towards your back foot kind of points towards the batter, and your body's in a certain way. Like, so there are lots of things. It has to be within 45 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. So it's somewhere between being completely perpendicular to the batter and being to point directly at the batter. So you point somewhere towards mid wicket. So there are so many versions and variations of bowling actions, and every time you think the cricket world has got its head around what is better, side on or front on, you get someone like a Bumrah or a Patirana, who's more extreme than even a Malinga is. Like, look how low is the delivery release point is. So with Bumrah, I think it's also, he went from playing a good amount of cricket to a lot of cricket in the space of 4 or 5 years. He had played first class cricket. Doesn't mean that he hadn't, but he suddenly plays a lot of test cricket. And I think also now with injuries as well in world cricket, you also have to decide which part of the cricket calendar you want to really focus on. It does not mean that I'm saying that players pick between league and national duty. That's not what I'm saying at all. But also, when you get injured and do you get time to recover from that? There were ICC tournaments, and Bumrah is a strange case in terms of, there have been so many times in the last few weeks and months where the BCCI have come out and said he'll be ready. I mean, he was supposed to be ready for the second half of the Australia Test series, and that's when we hear, no, you know what? In fact, he's not going to be ready for that, nor the IPL. The best chance is we see him during the 50-over World Cup. Jofra Archer, and again, a very unique action. His load up is unique, his run up is not very long, and he keeps injuring his elbow. I've read pieces about how that will continue to be a case unless he works on his bowling action, but clearly he's not very keen to do that. I remember spending an hour or so with Stephen Jones last time I was in England in 2019. I don't know whether he still runs it. He used to run like this fast bowling academy, or it was all about the biodynamics. And the reason I met him was my good friend and former, I don't know, can you call him former? Yeah, I guess former India fast bowler Varun Aaron, who has been drafted into the IPL now as a replacement for David Willey, I think, was working with him. So he'd flown to England in 2019 to work on getting even faster and working on his body. And it was a fascinating hour and a half. Though I must admit 30-40% of what he said was way too too complex for my simple brain to understand. But it was beautiful how he broke down front on actions and side on actions. And you should, James in particular, because he seems to be so keen on this aspect of cricket, you should definitely follow Stephen Jones. And he has a Facebook page where he's constantly
Facebook and
talking about,
LinkedIn. He puts everything
and
up for
LinkedIn as
people
well.
to learn about it. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
plenty of information up on that, or you can just contact him, James, and ask him.
yeah.
We're going to take a short break here, and then after the break, we'll get to more questions.
Our next partner is Athletic Greens. If cricket has taught us anything, it's that green things are good for you. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens every day. I gave AG1 a try because a while back I was stuck in a studio reporting on New Zealand, England on overnights. When those games weren't on, I was up early watching India, Australia at around 4 a.m. In between afternoon naps, I had to watch the Women's World Cup. And when all that was finished, I was doing early mornings for Bangladesh, England. Ignoring the fact that there's too much cricket, that's a stupid schedule for a human being as well. And so Athletic Greens was a far better alternative to ice baths. And after taking it, I felt a lot better. In fact, the whole thing probably kept me sane and healthy at the same time. And also being the kind of nutritional drink I needed to survive those hours, and also the 2 a.m. biltong binges I did a few times. Look, I am not going to pretend I have a balanced diet. So Athletic Greens is how I cover the nutritional basis. 1 small scoop of AG1 with water, and I drink it first thing in the morning each day. Done. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletics Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and also 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/Inca. That's the Inca from the end of my Red Inca podcast. So athleticgreens.com/Inca. Check it out now because it is the best screen top you'll ever invest in.
All right, welcome back to Wagon Wheel, Jarrod and Bharat. Graham says, how big of a problem is illegal streaming to the ICC and or individual boards? Recently moved to Germany. It's a real struggle to find reliable information on how to watch cricket here. To be honest, most countries, it's hard to find the information. I'm happy to pay for a good quality product, but I wonder how many people go down the illegal route. Look, it's an issue. Giles Clark once said it was the biggest issue facing cricket, which is still one of the funniest things I've ever heard, but especially considering everything that he was involved with in cricket. But they're more worried at the moment. They try and shut all those sites down, but they can't. Like, they'll never be able to shut them down, and they kind of know that. They also know that, like, as you probably know, Graham, actually watching cricket on illegal streams is one of the most frustrating things of all time. You know, it freezes, you get behind the play, you've got stupid ads up on the screen, you know, all that. I'm sorry, I just don't want to buy a bride from Russia. And I've said it so many times, and you keep trying to sell them to me. They're also, you know, so it is an issue, but it's something that they follow quite closely. The best one was Cricket GIF, of course, which I reckon was basically illegally streaming cricket for about 18 months. And it still took the ICC forever to finally shut them down. So they do have lawyers and people involved with all that sort of stuff.
Also, maybe why they will start trying to stream some games on their own platform, right? I just got an email a couple of days ago. I think is it safe to say the Bangladesh Ireland series is going to be
No, you're right. Yeah, I
on,
forgot about that.
on ICC TV. So maybe that's a great direction for the ICC to take, because you're in an era or an age where a lot of national associations or national cricket boards have started doing that, right? Every county game, if I'm not mistaken, is on live stream. Obviously, it's easier to do it in Australia because there are only 3 games at any point of time during the Sheffield Shield. But aren't all 9 games of the season or at a point on live streaming at some point in England? So that's good. And
everything's streamed over here. I mean, to be honest, now the thing is that most first-class games in the world have a camera there because they're filming it for analysts as well. So they're actually, you know, and you know, you were seeing European cricket and all sorts of things. So we'll see more and more stuff. I think the original plan was to have cricket.tv. I think the ICC have moved away from that because the boards don't want to share the revenue with the ICC, or they don't want the ICC controlling it. That would have been the dream, Graham. But at the moment, I would say to you that if you ask someone officially from the ICC, they'd say definitely never use an illegal stream. If you ask them unofficially, they'll be like, we'd rather you watch cricket than not watch cricket.
Exactly. For the first time I used an illegal stream, was
you've never used one. You're a fucking angel.
No, I have. I've used it once in 2011-12 when India came to Australia. I was in India and I wanted to hear the Channel 9 commentary. And I found This is but before brides from Russia were in vogue. It was still sex toys that were being sold. Like, yeah, but and
That was on Channel 9, though. That was Tony Craig.
it was, yeah, of course. No, but like, yeah, at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, yeah, you kind of are made to wonder about whether you need a particular sex toy or not, right? Like, it's more at 6:30 a.m. than at, like, say, at noon. But
No,
yeah,
at noon, you just buy it. You don't even think.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't even think about it.
Nadika says, what do players do during the lunch break? Do they eat? Do teams provide them with nutritious meals, or do they have to bring their own lunch boxes? Not all players eat, just because if you're bowling, you may not want to eat. Obviously, there are sweets available for players who need energy rush. There is most teams now provide a dietary plan, even when they're on the road. There are, I mean, we won't get into the full thing. I actually did a podcast about this very recently, Nadika, if you want to go back. It was a couple of weeks ago with an Indian food blog who were very interested about this topic. Generally, no one brings their own food into the ground other than snacks and things like that you have around. But for lunch, those are all provided for, unless you're Ishant Sharma and you're at the Gabba. But you can hear about that on the podcast, which Bharat knows all about. But yes, these days, in the old days, you would turn up and it'd be more like a restaurant, but I suppose more like a corporate event where you could pick from about 3 or 4 different meals. These days, there's usually a lot more on offer, and the players generally pick things beforehand. But they get food during training sessions, after the game. There's so much food around for international players and franchise league players because you're never sure how long it's going to take you to get back to the hotel, whether you're going to want to eat when you get back to the hotel. I know some players who would eat as much food as they could at the ground so that they didn't have to spend their per diem. All these sorts of things come into it.
And if you are someone like Hardik Pandya, who at this point doesn't have to worry too much about money in terms of he's well taken care of financially, you bring your own chef, like he did for the T20 World Cup last year in Australia. So he was traveling with his partner was there, his child, and he had his own chef. And good on him. Like he's so conscious about what he puts in his body that and he can afford to do it. So why wouldn't you do it? So he was making sure not only that he was following the app. A lot of cricketers now have apps on their phone based on their national boards, or depending on, even some franchises do, where you kind of are told what you can eat, what you shouldn't eat, or on a daily basis, right? Or like, it's 9 o'clock, eat now, eat your nuts now. Or whatever it is. So I think that
Are
is.
we back to the sex toys?
No,
now.
At the moment it came out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh, Gabe, I don't know what I'm saying now."
Next question. But yes, he's right. Everything he just said is correct. Christopher says, with all the talk of the 100 and potential Indian private investment, do you think the ECB would have any leverage in selling it off privately, but wanting a guarantee that Indian players can be involved? Or do the IPL owners and the BCCI not have that strong a working relationship? Look, I've said this before. I think eventually the IPL owners are going to have more power than the BCCI. So if you're selling a league now to IPL owners, you are selling it at least potentially for one day for the Indian players to be brought out there. So I would say that is the case. That's the only. I don't think ECB have any leverage other than the fact that the IPL owners do want to own the England teams, and I think that is a key part of it. Owning a bit of English cricket for an Indian billionaire is quite a big deal. But leverage-wise, no. But if you are selling to IPL owners, that's kind of what you're thinking going ahead.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I was on radio a couple of days ago. I said, whatever Manoj Batale said, and you know him really well, there was a time when, internationally, if you heard an IPL franchise owner say something about, or have a view on the future of cricket, you just disregarded it automatically because it's an Indian league, an Indian guy. What does he know about world cricket? But now it's changed completely. So if you are if you have your head in the sand and you're saying, oh, this is an IPL owner saying, talking nonsense about Test cricket, or Test cricket becoming a form of, or a Test match in Lords being compared to Wimbledon, then you have missed the train and it's gone. I mean, that's where the cricket world is headed. They have a voice now, these IPL franchise owners, because they're not just IPL franchise owners anymore. They are major stakeholders in the game of cricket, in the sport of cricket. And they, in a way, at the current moment, have as much sway over where cricket goes as any national board or the ICC does, including the BCCI. And you're so right. for the longest time, I don't think the BCCI even expected the IPL franchise owners to reach a point where they're on par with them. But if they didn't, they're kind of silly of them, because you're talking about some of the richest, smartest business people in the world coming together and investing a lot of their own money into this league, which when it started, nobody knew where it was going in 2008.
No, and the other thing is that Lalit Modi invented it based on Premier League football and the NBA and the NFL.
Exactly.
In all of those places, the owners have more power than the people who run the sport. And so that's not going to be any different for the IPL going forward. Will says, who benefits more from Robertson bowling to Smith in the Sussex Nets? Or is it just good for media talk and will have no substantial effect when they play each other in the Ashes? I remember Virat Kohli wanting to face Kyle Jamieson in the nets and Kyle Jamieson refusing to bowl to him for a while. It probably depends on the players individually. I'm not sure that there's a batter versus bowler thing. It gives you a chance. With Robertson, he has, the second or third highest release point in Test cricket at the moment. It's not an easy thing to prepare for if you're Steve Smith. Yeah. So I'd probably, and that's probably why Virat Kohli wanted to face Kyle Jamieson in the nets as well. So I would like to prepare for it from that point of view. It's not, when you're bowling to someone in the nets, it's not a direct, as we've talked about before, it's not a direct correlation with what happens in the game anyway and how you build up overs and everything else. But if I was a batter, I wouldn't mind seeing exactly where the ball comes from and getting a little bit more used to that if it was at all possible.
Having seen more of Steve Smith bat in the nets than most other things in life,
and
I can tell you
alive.
Or I think if someone were to ask me, when my time comes, what did you spend doing the most in your life? I think watching Steve Smith bat in the nets might be number one. It certainly is at the moment. One thing I've learned from him or watching him is, yes, he would be taking a few cues from what Ollie Robinson's bowling and release points, but his batting stints are so much more about what he's doing and what he's feeling like. You hear him talk about getting his hands back or feeling his hands again, getting the grip again. So those are the things he actually works on at this part. It's been like a sort of an off season for him. So at this stage of the cricket season for him, those are the things he's working on. Obviously, he would have taken a couple of cues about Ollie Robinson, but I think Ollie Robinson has more to gain from bowling to Steve Smith. He has bowled to him before in Test cricket. I'm sure he bowled him during the Ashes. He played 4 out of the 5 tests 18 months ago. But just getting into that zone of watching someone like Steve Smith and how his body moves, his alignment. Like Ashwin speaks a lot about how it's a dance when you're bowling to someone like Steve Smith, right? You're part of a dance, because there are these moments that if you can kind of really master with Steve Smith, and it's the same with most people who play sport at a very high level and are really good at it, and they kind of have repetitive techniques, right? So whether it's basketball, I'm sure you're an expert, you can tell me that, or any other sports, you can take cues from that. So I think Ollie Robinson, in a strange way, in my book, has more to gain from bowling to Steve Smith than the other way around.
I would say this, that if you look at it in general, Will, there are teammates where the bowlers dominate the batters and there are teammates where the batters dominate the bowlers. So I don't think it's necessary. There's not like a dead set reason why either one should have a better advantage.
Yeah.
It says, with the Ashes starting next month, which member of the 2005 side would England most like at their peak to plug a gap in 2023? Well, I don't know if it was plug a gap, but, you'd take a lot of pressure off Ben Stokes' knees if Flintoff could bat at... Exactly. Where would he bat in this team? He'd bat at 7, would he? And then you'd bat Bairstow at 6 or 5 or something and fit them all in. Then you'd have Bairstow at 5, Stokes at 6, and Flintoff at 7. That'd be pretty handy. I don't think my answer is ever not going to be an all-rounder with one of those hypothetical questions. They've got tall bowlers. If Jofra's fit, then you don't want Harmison. But if Jofra's not fit, you do want Harmison. If they were playing in Asia, I'd probably want Simon Jones more. I don't think there's any of... unless... I suppose then the only other option is that they actually need an opening batter, and I've completely forgotten about that. They did used to have
what
those.
I was waiting for. Like Marcus Trescott is an automatic pick for me. Yeah,
even Vaughan,
even Michael Vaughan. Yeah, one of the two for sure. Yeah, just slots in perfectly. And both could have the skills to adapt to the baseball version of England's Test cricket. So
Yeah,
both would have
Trescothick
been
certainly,
adapted
yeah.
that. Yeah. So yeah, the moment I saw this question, Marcus Trescothick just flashed in front of my eyes. Initially, I thought Kevin Peterson, but there are enough. The
They've
middle
got
order
middle
is
order guys, right? Like, where does he bat
exactly.
in that situation? Well, I'm
Exactly.
not saying he's not better than some of the others,
No,
but
no.
I think you're right. I think that's their biggest weakness. It doesn't matter if it's Strauss, Trescothick, Vaughan, anyone at top 3 is probably going to be better. Because I don't think Cook is after that, isn't he?
He's after that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
2016
they would take pre-test match. They would take whatever Cook was. I don't even know if he played a test match at that point. I don't think he did. I think he played
No,
the
he
next year.
hadn't.
But
No.
they would
Yeah.
even take him over most of the guys I have now. Josh says, what happened to Bharat on the last Uncovered podcast? He looked completely different, like a whole new person.
Sounded
Sometimes he's
different
like
as well.
that.
He
It's
is.
because he was wearing a hat.
morph into different. Yes. Unless he means Peram and I don't look alike, yeah, which is also
You're
possible.
both
He's
sexy,
talking
but
about
in a
the
different way.
in a different way, yeah.
Josh says, what if tests for 4 days, but each day at 4 30 over sessions? So the idea at the moment is probably to get 100 overs a day, not 120 overs a day. I think 120 overs a day means that we're basically saying that fast bowling doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly, yeah.
The only way you could do that would be if you bring in substitutions. If you brought in substitutions, then you could do it. But they're probably not going to anytime soon. But if that was the case, I just think it's too long.
Well, the only other way to do it is split the day up, where you have 2 sessions. Say the test match starts at 10 a.m. So 10 to 12, and then take a 15-minute break or 20-minute break, and then play 12:20 to 2:20. Break it up, and then play under lights. So I think we just invented our own new format.
That's interesting, but I'm still thinking about fast bowlers just from a perspective of if you bowled in those first 2 sessions and then you have all those hours off, is it possible that you get
exactly
stiff? And then I don't know. I mean, maybe you don't. I don't know.
Maybe you have. I mean, with modern medicine and physiotherapy, let's try it.
What would it be called? The Bharat day-night plan.
The day-night plan. And you get like lunchtime off. You get a snooze in, a siesta, whichever part of the world you're playing.
It's not day-night cricket, is it? It's day and night cricket.
Day and night cricket. There you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure it works for the crowd. I'm not sure what they do in the middle, but we'll work it out later.
Yeah, we'll have like entertainment for them. Yeah.
Abhinav says, in general, how good are player agents in cricket? Have we reached the 2023 version of Jerry Maguire levels? Look, there's some very, very good agents out there at the moment. There's still a lot of, I don't know what you call them, Bharat, but like domestic agents who, what they do is anytime a young player comes through, they just sort of scoop them up, and they usually, like you'll get them in the north of England and the center of England and the south, and then, state by state, you have them in Australia, and the same happens in India. And they pick up all these, and you look at their websites and they've got like 38 players on there, and you're like, 7 of these guys haven't played like 5 games yet, and the other 10 people finished playing 20 years ago. Like, what deals are you getting? There's a lot of that sort of stuff out there. When you get to the top, there's some very, very good and very, very savvy player agents at the top level. Me and Barrett have to deal with those sorts of people quite a lot. There's a lot of very good T20 ones, some very good international ones as well. Some that now like have like a combination where they do media and players and coaches and analysts and everything else. Have you got an agent, by the way, in cricket specifically?
No, I was thinking about it last evening as I was driving out of a parking lot. I was like, maybe it's time I have an agent. It just sounds good.
I had an agent. In fact, I've had agents right across my career, and I don't think an agent's actually ever got me any work. I'd have to go back and check.
Really?
But I've had plenty of agents. But I've had one. I had a cricket agent who came on board, and they tried to get me some work with teams and stuff. In some ways, it was actually, I found it pretty good because most of the agents that I know are very, that I'm friends with are very, very smart. So they didn't always help me get work, but I could say to them, look, this team's come to me. What can you tell me? And they just know all the backstory that,
wow. Okay.
So the ability to say, you probably can't go with them because, that team's actually owned by a drug dealer and it's a tax write-off. And you're like, okay, well, cross that one off the list then. That sort of stuff that, as a journalist, you don't always know, or is it even as someone who works for teams, you don't always know, what the backstory of all these people are.
No, not at all. But on player agents, one thing that has changed is a lot of these big name international players, do have agents at home, but they might also have an Indian agent. And a lot of the West Indian cricketers have multiple agents. So because India is such a big market, some
Yeah.
Australians do as well. Like, so even if it might not be full time, the time that they spend in India, they'll have an agent, like who'll sort out deals for them in India. And not just the current players, even former players. A lot of former players have Indian agents and people who sort out deals for them in India. Because let's face it, that is the big
But that's
market.
but the other thing is you would know there's a lot of this happens more with Sri Lankan and Pakistani players, but it used to happen with Indian players until the agents got very, very big. That
Yeah.
you would have an agent in all the different places that you go to, so that you can get work in Australia, you can get work in
Yeah.
Pakistan, UAE, England. So sometimes someone will introduce themselves as a Pakistani player's agent, and I'll be like, look at my phone, I'll have 3 other agents contacts for that player already. So it's a bit of a wild west, but I think it's a lot better than it was. I don't know if it's at Jerry Maguire levels. I'm not sure
No.
if you want to be at Jerry. I'm not sure if Jerry Maguire is the right level. I don't, wasn't he going bankrupt up until that point? I'm not sure. I don't remember the movie at all. Aditya says, if you asked to come up with a list of the greatest test innings that you have seen, how much weightage would you give whether the player's team eventually won the game or not? For instance, Lara's 153 versus Australia and Tendulkar's 136 versus Pakistan, both in the 4th innings. No, he's talking about the fact that Lara finished the job. With the tail. I wouldn't. The win and the loss doesn't matter anything to me. I'm trying to think. There was a absolutely great innings that I've completely forgotten now that I thought was one of the best I ever saw, and it came in a loss. And that didn't bother me at all. I saw Jarrod Kimber make a great 100 in a draw, which is still like when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at degree of difficulty because of the pitch, because of the match situation.
Yeah.
Although the opposition attack, the fact that you win or lose it doesn't necessarily make that much of a difference. Batting in the 4th innings generally does, although not always. Sometimes you get good 4th innings wickets. But on tougher 4th innings wickets when no one else can score, those sorts of things. But the Sangakkara innings, that's what I was thinking of, the one in Hobart.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be hard to see that innings and not think of it as one of the best you've ever seen. The fact that he went out at the end doesn't actually change the way I look at that innings. It was absolutely a remarkable knock.
Yeah, every time I'm asked this question about the best test knock I've covered, I just keep circling back to Kevin Peterson at the Wankhede in 2012 because of the impact he had on that match, on that series, and on how to attack spin in India. I mean, Matthew Hayden had done it famously, maybe 10 years, 11 years prior to that. But the first test of the series, England lose. Alistair Cook makes runs, but they haven't really done well in that match. And to come to Bombay and on a pitch which was like a proper red soil pitch, a classic Bombay pitch, it was spin and turn from very early on. Spin and turn. There was spin and bounce, turn and bounce from early on. Turn and bounce. People will jump on me and say I don't know what spin and what turn is. But on a pitch like that, the way he took down Harbhajan Singh, Pragyan Oja, and R. Ashwin, if I'm not mistaken, was just sensational batting. Some mighty sixes, and it was the most positive I'd seen an English batter be against spin at that point. And he played really well against Sri Lanka or in Sri Lanka just before that. But then, would it have been? Would I talk about it if England had not won that test? I still think I would have, but then he was dependent on Swan and Panesar having that great spell together, and spinning England to victory famously. Getting rid of Tendulkar and Pujara a couple of times. Panesar did so. The 4th innings by design will always stand out as being more significant because you have won. You think that like Ben Stokes in Leeds. So much happened in that test match before Ben Stokes happened, but you'll always credit Ben Stokes for the victory, and so you should. So does that make it the greatest innings? And the two he's mentioned, like Brian Lara, West Indies win with 1 wicket in hand, and also the circumstances in which that game was played.
Yeah.
The previous one, he makes the double 100 in Jamaica, but the series starts with the 51 all out. Where does West Indies cricket go from here, from Tony Cozier? And then similarly with Tendulkar, India, Pakistan, Chennai, the big return of India, Pakistan cricket. He's battling injuries and wickets are falling at the other end, and he almost takes India home. So in a 4th innings context, if you play a great innings and you still can't win the game for your country, just by default, it doesn't jump out at you as much as say, an innings like the 153 or the Ben Stokes one.
I would add Angelo Matthews' 100 at Headingley as well. That was a remarkable
Yeah.
one. And they won that game by like, what, 2 balls or whatever in the end. Like, if it's a draw, I don't think that makes anything different. I think that Bharat is right, though. These things stick in your memory a little bit more. But I think some of the best innings I've seen have been in losing courses and drawn courses. So I don't think that's not how I would mark it, but it might be how you remember it, just because, you're more likely. So, Nathan says, if Owen Morgan had never happened, how would the careers of dashers like Hales, Roy, Bartlett, and the rest shaped up? Did England always have plenty of such players, or did the revolution create a new crop like Livingston and Brooks? Do you see green shoots for India's with players like Verma, Jarrod, and Wadira? So to go to the first thing, if you go back, and I've done this before, if you look at the Pro 40 era, these guys were all averaging ridiculously high amounts and striking at 120. I think at a certain point when they were losing, whether it was Owen Morgan or not, they would have had to bring them in. I think it would have been different. The freedom that a lot of those guys got was the fact that their batting lineup suddenly went to 9, 10, and 11, which meant that they could go as hard as they wanted for as long as they wanted, which means, and they were also told, if you fail, you fail. We just think you are the best players. A lot of that was created by Morgan. Obviously, Bayliss played a big part, and, Andrew Strauss. There were many different people that were involved. So I do think from that perspective, it helped them flourish. But I think most of those guys would have got to go, just because if the more we got into white ball, the more their numbers just didn't make any sense, and that you would have to have a go at them. The new crop, again, I think it all comes out of that original style. I can't. The Pro 40 is where it starts. It's not Owen, and Moen Morgan was part of that because he was one of the batters there. But it really starts before that, and English players were attacking. That was one of the reasons that Owen Morgan went with that style. So it's not just about him, even if he plays a big part in it as well. So I think from that perspective, that would have happened. I still don't see it in India. I'm not saying that there aren't players like that coming through, but I still don't see it in India, partly because we still see players like Hardik Pandya becoming anchors, right? We still see players gearing back down again. That's not what we saw in England. So I see something different in India. I think I wrote in 2015 that India had the talent to score 500 in an ODI game. And I still actually believe that 8 years later. But I don't think they've ever had the mindset to score 500 in an ODI game.
I mean, there are times you think they have cracked the code, like you see Ishan Kishan and Shubman Gill have that dream run for a brief period of few months. I mean, we haven't seen them play one-day cricket since. But then, when it comes to India and bilateral cricket, when it comes to white ball stuff, and India and ICC tournaments is so different, right? Like when it comes to ICC tournaments, it almost feels like the band is back together, and they're so conscious about picking like not having any wild card picks in the squad. Even it took Surya Kumar Yadav so long to break into that squad and break that mindset. He had to do it repeatedly for 4-5 seasons in the IPL, and then leave the selectors with no choice but to pick him and make him a regular member of the side. So as impressive as Tilak Verma and Dhruv Jural and Vadera are, I think, it's a good sign. I mean, there are others as well. Ayush Badoni has been doing it for a couple of years, and you look up and down, there are so many. I mean, Rinku Singh's not very old either, so he's pretty young in that sense. So I just think that you will have to, it doesn't like at the end of the day, it depends on what the selectors pick, and once you get to the Indian team, what roles you're given. I mean, whether you're a Verma or a Jurel or a Vadera. But with England, I mean, I have a question for you. I mean, do you think Pro 40 is where the strike rates start increasing, but do you also think it could be there's any link that can be drawn between the period where from 2011-12 onwards, more English players started attracting the attention of the IPL, and the ECB kind of finally accepted the IPL as a thing that's here to stay, and started allowing their players more. So if you were an English player, I mean, compare it to 2008, 9, 10. I mean, apart from Dimitri Mascarenas and a bit of Kevin Peterson, and I'm sure I'm missing out on a couple of others, there weren't too many English players really doing the rounds at that point.
Yeah,
maybe that played a role as well.
I mean, I think it's played a role in everyone looking at cricket, but they could still have been anchors, right? They didn't have to be attacking players. Like the fact that they're attacking is the more interesting thing. And I do think that the attacking certainly comes before the IPL, or before the IPL has any effect anyway.
Yeah.
And it's probably something to do with the fact that England played T20 cricket before everyone else, which we kind of ignore now, but they played a lot of it as well when, even when no one else had really played that much. In fact, one of the big inefficiencies of the early IPL is that they didn't use all the English knowledge in that tournament, because they actually looked down on the England players, whereas actually now we look at it and go, oh, that might have been where the talent was. But let's get another Australian in. But so I do think there were issues with that. But I definitely think the actual attacking nature is probably more to do with. I think also some of these things to do with grounds, right? The other team that probably has the most like recklessly attacking players is New Zealand. And in both cases, they're both very right arm seam dependent. All you have to do is line up the right arm seamers over and over again on small grounds. And play through the line. And that is a big part of T20 cricket. And that's where you're always going to get a higher strike rate from smashing seam bowling than you are from spin bowling because of where they bowl, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into the boring parts of that. I did it in the video the other day about right arm bashes, if you all need to see it. But so I do think from that perspective, that's probably more to do with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they really came into the IPL that much early on, though. I would say that it was probably PSL, and Big Bash, that really, and then a lot of the stuff that happens in the Middle East and everything. That was probably the stuff that they actually were playing towards. The IPL kind of comes later, right? Like other than the top handful of players, but there's no doubt that players think about things differently now than they did before, and so it should have definitely played a part as well. Satchmo says, which bowler would you anticipate taking the most wickets in the Ashes, fitness permitting? I'm going to say Josh Hazlewood, just because my dad has this mental blank where he still thinks Josh Hazlewood's crap. And I'm hoping he watches this. Don't get me started. I was at his 50th wedding anniversary, and it was just like, he wouldn't stop saying it. And like people were like Googling his stats and giving them to me. My old man wouldn't have it at all. I'm going to say Josh Hazlewood. I think he'll play all 5 tests. Fitness permitting. But I don't think he's ever had an epic Ashes. First time, he was still getting to grips with it. Second time, he was rested from a couple of games. This time, I think he'll play in them all, and he's fantastic.
It's all about fitness. Like, I mean, that's the question as well, because he's had so many breakdowns in the last 18 or so months. And I'll never forget the expression on his face earlier this year in Bangalore when they were having the camp. It was just Louis Cameron and I. And he was supposed to do a press conference, or like it ended up just being the two of us, Louis and I. But he who works for cricket.com.au and does a great job. But I don't know whether it was planned or he did it because he had realized that he had injured himself again. But he was so crestfallen, because I remember speaking to him on ACN before the Sydney test, and he was like, all my energies are geared towards just playing test cricket. This is a big test calendar for Australia coming up. I'm ready to spend more time in the nets, even if it means I have to miss out on some T20 cricket here and there. Test cricket is all I want to play. And then he breaks down before the camp in India, and he was really, really, you could see it in his face. He was just walking around the ground, very sullen faced. And that is the only issue with him. Now, he's been picked as among just 4 specialist fast bowlers for the first 3 test matches of the England tour, which includes the World Test Championship final. But will his body hold up? And that's, he's played 3 IPL games now, which is a good to see. But he's bowled what, 10 overs in 3 games. So how much do you read into it? And I asked George Bailey about it when he did the press conference when the squad was announced, and he said, like, I mean, he's a professional. Josh knows what he has to do, but you won't find out till he actually plays that first test match. And if he plays, you're right. I mean, he's become such a brilliant all-round bowler across all formats, and because he's so hungry to make this his test here. You look at Josh Hazlewood, he hasn't changed much since he made his debut at the Gabba in 2014. I remember covering that test match. He looks the same, so you don't realize that he's 33. I think if he's the same age as Mitchell Starc. He's been around for a long time. So he might not have too many years left as a test cricketer. So he'll be trying to make the most of it. And I'm going to agree with you. If he plays, his body holds up, which is what Sashmo wants us to know, wants to talk about, I think he will end up with the most wickets.
Quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll mop up the comments in the chat. You're listening to Uncovered. No, is it Uncovered? What show are we on? Wagon Wheel.
Wagon Wheel.
Wagon Wheel with Jarrod Kimber and Bharat Sundaresan.
A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be. And from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster, making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.
All right. Thank you very much for everyone who's been in the chat today. Because we've gone very late and we both have actual jobs and sleep and whatever else we have to do, dogs to do. We've just got the one super chat. Just on the microphone, it's not a new microphone. It's an old microphone, and I sent it to Shaw, who make these microphones, and they told me there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. But as you can hear, it has dropped out a couple of times. So apologies for that. I don't know what is going on with it. There's something to do with the cord, but hopefully this time they'll listen to me. Maybe I'll just send them this recording. But sorry about that, everyone. Cameron has sent through a super chat. Thank you very much, Cameron. He says, what odds would you give Major League Cricket to make it to 3+ season? Does he mean 3 seasons or does he mean 4?
I think he means 3 seasons and a few more.
I mean, they have raised more money than the CPL's ever made. So from that perspective, if they don't make it to the 4th season, they've done something horribly, horribly wrong. I think it's been a bigger endeavor than they thought it was going to be. I think more money, more problems. Making smaller leagues is not particularly hard. Making big ones is. I know they've had problems with, USA cricket and how all those things intertwine. And, they almost lost minor league cricket, if I'm reading the tea leaves recently. So, look, I think from that perspective, it's tough. But with the amount of money they've raised, I think it would have to take... I think USA cricket would have to actually decide to eat itself in order to ruin Major League Cricket. Now, if any other board in the world, I might be like, that's not that big of a chance. USA cricket, it's a possibility. But I'd say they're at 70% chance to have 4 seasons or more.
And you, I think, hit the nail on the head at the very start of your answer, because it's the people who have invested their money into it, right? I mean, just American cricket or US cricket, it's the Times Group. And a lot of the IPL franchise owners have also, seen it as a market that it's.
Microsoft
I mean, maybe
CEO. Do you know what
exactly.
I mean? Proper money.
And maybe it's might sound a little far-fetched, but America or USA is to world cricket, or not like the ICC so much, but to all these other franchise owners who have, like we discussed earlier, as much of a say on world cricket these days as anyone else. What India is to FIFA, right? Like, the Football Federation always looks at India, the population, and the excitement that football/soccer generates in India as being the big market that they want to crack. And similarly, the US has been identified, and it has not so much to do with the with the Cowboys in the southern part of the country, or I don't know why I had to bring them up, but I don't think they're thinking of some of my wrestling friends in Alabama and Tennessee when they think US is a big market for cricket. They're instead thinking of the massive subcontinent expat population, all spread all around, and the Caribbean expat population, and everyone else living in the US who are dying. And why just the subcontinent? Even Australian and English expats living there were dying for cricket that they can call their own. I was speaking to a friend of mine who lives just outside LA yesterday. I mean, he's of Indian origin. It's a great story. I met him through my wrestling circles. He randomly discovers cricket 4 5 years ago through the IPL, and now he's a diehard fan. So he's been trying to get more information about where the major league's happening, the schedule, but nothing's out. So he was like complaining about how he wants to, because they know that it's going to be played in Texas. But he said, unlike in some other parts of the world, you can't just make plans in the US to go to from California to Texas overnight. You need to know well in advance. I think those things will get ironed out eventually, which is what I said, because of the people involved with this league. And it is here to stay, and it'll grow a lot. And that's what I keep telling my wrestling friends or people who are in the wrestling industry. Someone like Jeff Jarrett, for example, I said, make sure you're like, because he's such a smart businessman, make sure, like, leave your guitar aside. I know, obviously, who Jeff Jarrett is, right?
Yeah.
Finally. So I've told him, leave your guitar aside and, look seriously into investing into cricket, because that's the next big thing.
Just to talk about the market in general, Cameron, I don't know where you're based, but I've just put up Kyle's question on the screen. I'm not going to ask it, Kyle, so don't get excited. But I put up Kyle's question on the screen because Kyle is an American cricket fan, and he's not a traditional cricket fan, as in, as far as I'm aware, he's family aren't Australian or Kiwi or Indian or Zimbabwean or wherever else, unless Kyle's going to correct me. He has an American accent, so I know that much because he used to come through on the old chats. It is starting to happen. I'm getting more and more of them. I've noticed really on the Patreon how many Americans are coming through. I'm getting emails from American fans all the time. Yeah, obviously we've got John Boy as well. Pablo Torre Pablo Torre's left ESPN, but when he was with ESPN, he was interested in getting more cricket on. So there is something to attach to. This wasn't, as someone who's online, a cricket guy who's online, this wasn't the case 5 years ago. It certainly wasn't the case 10 years ago. 5 years ago, there was like 5 people. 10 years ago, there was like 3 people. There was Peter Della and whoever he was talking to. It really is changing a lot. With that in mind, with the owners in mind, and I think also, I'm pretty sure I'm right, that the owners own a share of the league. So
they do. Yeah.
They're putting a lot of money in, and they own a percentage of Major League Cricket. So they can't allow it to fail from that perspective, unless, sunk cost fallacy or whatever. But they're more likely to prop it up, I would have thought, than anyone else, just because they have lots of money and they do believe in this. That's why they've done it. Anyway, thank you to Bharat. Thank you to everyone who asked questions, from Cameron all through to all the different people who did it on Patreon. We will be back again next week for another show. I'll find out like about 5 minutes before which show Bharat's going to be on, and we'll take it from there. But thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time on Wagon Wheel.
If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for watching everything we make and for all your support so far.